So, what is story theme? What does it have to do with the mind or the psyche? It's amazing to me how people seem to think there's no relationship between fictional stories and how the mind works. Oftentimes, it's fiction is just seen as escapism versus the real life, and how never the twain shall meet. But this is silly. Everything we do is a story. Our memories are composed as stories. Dreams are stories. Even our identity is created as a story. Our beliefs, where we're going in life, in the universe, our hopes, religion, God, everything is a story. In fact, there's a great quote by Muriel Rukeyser: "The universe is made of stories, not atoms." I love that. So then, what is a story then? Well, it's a message. It's a theme. So a theme, by the way, is not just subject matter. For example, Tolkien famously stated that Lord of the Rings was about death, but he wasn't expressing the specific theme that he develops in his story in that instance. He's saying that that's the subject matter of the story. And in fact, he says that the subject matter of the story is a very common one in many types of fantasy, going all the way back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, for example, which is also about death and immortality and things like that. But a theme is more than just a subject matter. A theme is a specific message about the subject matter. Okay. And in The Lord of the Rings, the theme is quite nuanced and complex, and it has a lot to say about not only the nature of death and how it's seen as a potential gift in some odd, strange way, but that also how it relates to evil and how evil cannot be resisted indefinitely without help from the divine. So there's a whole lot going on with this theme. Um, Other stories have simpler themes, like, say, the Avengers, which is working together helps you win versus not. It's a great theme, right? Kind of corny, but it works. Or Spider-Man. That's another one. The theme is explicitly stated multiple times in the Spider-Man universe, which is great power brings great responsibility. That's also a great theme. But what is the use of this kind of thing? Like, why are we so fascinated with stories? And why do we need themes? So let me pose a scenario for you, right? Consider, say, a teenage girl who has endured sexual trauma in her life. And consider that she's someone who really likes historical romances. Well, you might ask, well, why is that? Is she just escaping from the trauma? I would say probably not just that. It's easy to say that on the surface. It looks like, well, I'm having a hard time dealing with my traumas, so I'm going to escape into this story. This has a happy ending, and I'm just basically bullshitting myself, right? That's kind of the underlying idea behind this. Behind this theme that, or not this theme, but just this assertion that fiction is just escapism, especially fantasy. But consider the structure of such stories. In all of these, and I've read a few of these, the heroine endures a tremendous hardship and abuse, but through perseverance and hope, she is eventually able to find love and find a good life, find someone who's devoted to her. So it's a story that expresses a theme of hope in it, that if you are able to hang in there and don't give up and keep working and trying your best, then it is possible that you can move on with these things, that you won't be destroyed and you won't be completely annihilated by the things that have happened to you. So they're messages of hope. That's what the themes are in these kinds of stories. And there's a bazillion of them out there. In fact, I believe I read somewhere that half of every fiction novel published is a romance. Now, they're not all like this. Many romances, there's all kinds of romances, but this particular kind of one, I've actually observed this in some individuals who will use this as a coping mechanism. And my question then is this just escapism, or is this actually something that's probably therapeutic? I think, of course, like all things, it depends on the situation. But in this instance, I and the examples that I've run into about this do suggest that it may be a positive coping strategy, especially if no others are on offer. And this is because, especially in the face of trauma, you really have to have hope in order to make it. And there's a great quote by a scholar named Robert Emmett Meager. He's a scholar of humanities who studies trauma, and he writes very eloquently about trauma. And in an essay which he titled "Hope Dies Last," he writes, "With love and faith fallen, all that remains is hope, the sole surviving source of a spiritual pulse, the last unsevered lifeline to creative affirmation. When that line is cut, the soul dies, whether or not the body dies with it." And I can tell you, as a psychiatrist who have worked with folks like this, much as Meager has, this is absolutely true. There's a reason why hope is the last thing to come out of Pandora's box. And I've actually heard that from military trauma survivors who know anything about mythology. They'll mention Pandora's box, and I'll remind them that in at least one very prominent version of that story, all of the horrible things are released by Pandora, but hope is also in there too. So we've got to hang on to that. So, I mean, is that just some expression of this sort of rosy-eyed view of the world? And if we just, just hang in there and do right and all that kind of stuff, it's easy to look at that and be cynical and make fun of it. But when you're deep in it and you're really struggling with trauma, hope is not something that's disposable. And it's not something you can easily dispense with cynicism or nihilism. I mean, that's the kind of position that I think people take when they're either utterly hopeless and in a truly dangerous state of mind, or they're just kind of in a cozy, comfy, detached state of mind where they can kind of throw rocks at the idea and think, oh, that's just a bunch of baby fantasy gobbledygook nonsense. And I'm here to say, I think that latter attitude is quite destructive. So, getting back to the idea of theme, then, does every story have to have a theme? No, not really. Although I will say that there are storytelling experts out there that mention just how incredibly important theme really is. Dara Marks in her book Inside Story, John Truby in his book Anatomy of Story, Robert McKee in his book Story. All of these experts talk about the importance of theme and how to develop a theme in a story that you're telling. These are people that are working with writers on developing stories. And I think that ties into the importance of the idea of theme in the mind and in our emotional well-being. Marx, for example, says, start with your theme, build everything else around it. Take your theme and build your main character from that. Take their fatal flaw that they have to go through their character arc. Use your theme to tell you which one that's going to be. It also tells you the plot too, because if you're going to express your theme, you need to do it through your main character so that the reader can live through the experience of learning the theme. You do the villain by taking that fatal flaw and turning it on its head and making that person attack your main character as a counter theme, right? Robert McKee brings this up as well. The side characters, the setting, everything revolves around the theme. Now, I will say that for many writers who are not plotters, that may be difficult, and because sometimes the theme isn't immediately obvious in the story you're crafting. So some people have to kind of write for a while before the theme emerges, and that's totally fine. Theme is something that emerges from within, from the intuition, from the imagination. So, nevertheless, it's I think important to be able to nail it down as much as possible if you're a storytelling kind of person, or if you're just analyzing stories for their impact, their emotional impact, their psychological impact. It's good to be able to zero in on what you think the theme might be. In fantasy, the setting itself contributes to the theme. You can have paradisical cities of immortals, hellish pits of the Dark Lord, realms of blood, fire, magic, monsters, All of that stuff makes the theme come alive as it would in a vivid dream. Because fantasy doesn't have any fetters or limits, you can create a setting that delivers the theme of a story with perfect symbolic representation. But why go through all this trouble to deliver a theme? Why not just say the theme flat out? It's because if you do that, you rob the audience of the impact of your story. And this is not any way that people would want to hear a theme. They'll just listen to it and go, yeah, okay, whatever. This is the ultimate reason for show don't tell. If you just say, for example, indecision leads to poor outcomes, well, that's pretty forgettable. If, on the other hand, you experience that theme through the play Hamlet, which tells you and shows you exactly the depths of that theme, then you feel it. You understand all the nuances of it and the inner complexities, the images and emotions of it, and you'll get the theme on a nonverbal and deep level down into the bones. You'll come away from that story really, really understanding it in a way that you might not be easily able to verbalize. So theme is the key element in whether or not a story has the ability to impact someone for more than just 5 minutes. And I think that theme is every bit as important, not only in just storytelling, but all those other things that we use stories to create, like memory, like identity, like religious belief. Our understanding of the universe itself is one giant story. Stories without a theme say, you got these guys, we like them, and these other guys are trying to kill them, and they duke it out, and the good guys win. There's not much of a theme there, right? But there's lots of stories that do that. Or you may have stories with themes that are simple and obvious, like teamwork is great, like every other anime out there. We defeat the villain through the power of friendship, Okay, it's corny, but it's still something, right? And it's easy to turn our nose up at that and say, well, that's just frivolous stuff for the masses, it's genre fiction or whatever. But even a corny theme like hope in the face of adversity leads to a better life, like the romance novel example I gave earlier, that can be so beneficial for someone in the place where they need to hear it. Someone who desperately needs hope to get through the day, that can be just the medicine they need. So maybe let's not be so cynical or snobbish about this kind of thing. I think it's really important. Finally, keep in mind that when a story has a theme and it is executed well, I think the story becomes the theme. Now, what I mean by that is the story, through its symbols and metaphors and through its coherence as a unit, becomes an irreducible expression of that thematic idea within it. So when you're at that state or that level, or if you understand the theme of a given story at that level, then you already know that I could just say it in a sentence or two, like I did with Hamlet a minute ago, or say overweening reach for power leads to destruction, which would be the theme of Macbeth, for example. But that really doesn't do it justice, right? You have to see the play and experience that masterpiece to really get underneath all of the implications and all of the imagery and all the stuff that's ineffable about your theme. So hope that was useful, interesting, helpful. If you like that, click the like, subscribe to my channel, and enjoy some more videos on that. Check out my website also. I've got some podcasts and cool stuff there. And until next time, I'll see you.